Welcome, friends, to a tale of second chances, where a forgotten lullaby reopens the door to forgiveness. Enjoy the story. The Oregon sun beat down mercilessly on the shabby, single-wide trailer Evelyn Winters called home. At 42, her once beautiful face was lined with worry, her eyes red-rimmed from endless tears. Her son Mason stood before her, his lanky 16-year-old frame already turning away, his gaze fixed on the gleaming black Escalade where his father Victor waited. "Mason, please," Evelyn begged, her voice cracking. "Don't do this. We can make things better here." Mason's jawline, so like his father's, hardened. "Better? Mom, look around. I'm wearing thrift store clothes while Dad promises me designer brands. I'm tired of being poor, of being nobody." "Is that all that matters? Money?" Evelyn whispered, reaching for his arm. Mason jerked away. "Dad says I can go to the best schools in Seattle. I could be somebody important someday." "You're already somebody important to me," Victor honked impatiently. Through the tinted windows, his smirk was barely visible, the smirk of a man who'd finally won. "Dad says I don't have to see you anymore if I don't want to," Mason said, the cruel words hanging between them. "Your father only wants to hurt me by taking you," Evelyn pleaded. "He doesn't care." "Stop it," Mason snapped. "Just stop. Maybe if you weren't such a failure, I wouldn't need to leave." The words hit Evelyn like physical blows. She stumbled backward as Mason grabbed his single duffel bag and stalked toward the SUV. "Don't cry," he muttered without looking back. "It makes you look pathetic." The car door slammed, the engine revved. As the vehicle pulled away down the dusty road, Evelyn collapsed onto the parched grass, her arms outstretched toward her departing son, her sobs echoing across the empty yard. Inside the car, Mason fought back his own tears, staring straight ahead as his father's hand clapped his shoulder. "You made the right choice, son," Victor said, his voice smooth as expensive whiskey. "Trust me, you won't regret leaving that life behind." Mason said nothing, watching his mother grow smaller in the side mirror until she disappeared completely. The beeping of hospital monitors punctuated the silence in Victor Blackwell's penthouse bedroom. 13 years had transformed Seattle into Mason's kingdom, with his father's wealth opening every door. But tonight, as moonlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering cityscape, Mason felt like a stranger in his own life. Victor's once powerful frame had withered to skin and bones. Cancer, the doctors said. Inoperable. Weeks, maybe days left. "Mason," Victor's voice rasped, barely audible above the medical equipment. "I need to tell you something before it's too late." Mason adjusted the cashmere blanket covering his father. "Save your strength, Dad." "No." Victor's bony fingers clutched Mason's wrist with surprising strength. "You need to know the truth about your mother." Mason stiffened. They hadn't spoken of Evelyn in years. "I forced her to marry me," Victor confessed, his breathing labored. "She never loved me. God, it made me so angry. I hit her, Mason, more than once." "What?" Mason pulled away, stunned. "You told me she abandoned us, that she couldn't handle being a mother." Victor's laugh turned into a hacking cough. "I lied. When she finally got the courage to leave, I made sure she'd suffer. Called in favors, got her fired from jobs, ruined her credit, made her existence hell." "Jesus Christ." Mason stood up, pacing across the imported marble floor. "You did that deliberately? To my mother?" "I wanted her to crawl back." Victor's eyes welled with tears. "But she never did. Just kept trying to make a life for you both. For 13 years you've let me believe—" "I know what I did," Victor interrupted. "Find her, Mason. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her you're sorry too." Mason's jaw clenched. "You think an apology fixes this?" "No, but it's a start." Victor's eyes closed. "Promise me. Find her." Mason left without answering, his world crumbling around him as he realized what he'd thrown away. And for what? A life built on his father's cruel manipulation and his own teenage selfishness. In the hallway, he heard his father whisper, "I'm sorry, son." But Mason couldn't bring himself to acknowledge it. Some sins, he was learning, ran too deep for simple forgiveness. The Seattle skyline stretched out beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of Mason Blackwell's corner office. 10 years had passed since Victor's deathbed confession had shattered Mason's world and set him on this relentless quest to find his mother. Now at 39, he had everything money could buy, except the forgiveness he desperately sought. "Another dead end, sir," his assistant announced, placing yet another manila folder on his mahogany desk. "That's the 4th agency this year." Mason loosened his Hermes tie and flipped through the report. After his father's funeral, he'd vowed to honor that final request to find Evelyn, never imagining it would consume a decade of his life. Missing persons experts, private investigators, even former FBI agents, all had failed to find a single trace of her. 10 years, he muttered, running his fingers through his salt and pepper hair. 10 years of searching and nothing. The guilt was a constant companion, a weight pressing on his chest every morning when he woke. His mother had vanished like smoke, as if the universe itself had denied him redemption for abandoning her. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Blackwell, your 3 o'clock is here." "Send them in." Jackson Moore entered, a retired detective whose reputation preceded him. "Mr. Blackwell, I've reviewed the previous investigations." "And?" Mason leaned forward, hope flickering despite himself. "I won't waste your time. These agencies did thorough work. If your mother was findable through conventional means, they'd have found her." Mason's fist came down hard on his desk. "She didn't just evaporate. Someone, somewhere must know something." "There's one possibility left," Jackson said carefully, "but it's not cheap and they're unconventional. I don't care about money. Who are they?" "Arrow Investigations. They specialize in cases everyone else has given up on. Their methods push legal boundaries, but their success rate is unmatched." Mason grabbed his phone. "Get me their number." Later that night, Mason stood at his window watching raindrops race down the glass. He thought of his mother standing in the Oregon rain, waiting at a bus stop after another job loss his father had orchestrated. His phone vibrated with a text message. "Arrow Investigations. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. "I'll find you, Mom," he whispered. "Whatever it takes, I'll keep my promise and make things right." The clock on Mason's office wall struck 2, precisely as his assistant buzzed the intercom. "Sir, your Arrow Investigations representative is here." Mason straightened his tie, prepared to meet another hardened ex-cop or military type. He'd requested their most experienced investigator for the appointment Jackson Moore had arranged yesterday. "Send them in." His jaw nearly dropped when the door opened. The woman who sauntered into his office couldn't have been more than 27, barely 5'3", with a shock of copper-red hair. Her ripped jeans, scuffed boots, and worn leather jacket looked more appropriate for a college campus than a professional meeting. "Mr. Blackwell," she extended a hand. "Riley Marsh, Arrow Investigations." Mason hesitated before shaking it. "There must be some mistake. I requested your agency's top investigator." Riley's blue eyes flashed. "You're looking at her. 15 years in the business, 12 with Arrow. Highest success rate in the company." She dropped a worn leather messenger bag on the chair. "But if my appearance bothers you, I can leave. We don't lack for clients." "No, wait," Mason said. "Please sit. I apologize for my rudeness." Riley pulled out a tablet and several folders. "I've reviewed your previous investigative reports. Impressive thoroughness, actually." For the next 30 minutes, she methodically dissected each failed search attempt, identifying overlooked angles and possible new leads. Despite himself, Mason was impressed by her sharp intelligence and commanding knowledge. "So you can find her?" Mason asked finally. Riley's expression softened slightly. "Mr. Blackwell, after analyzing all data points, there are only 2 possibilities. Either your mother has passed away without identification, or she's deliberately maintaining complete anonymity." "That's it? That's your expert opinion?" "Sometimes the truth isn't complicated, just hard to accept." She packed her bag. "If she's alive, she doesn't want to be found. The report will be emailed tomorrow." "That's not good enough," Mason snapped, hitting the security button under his desk. "I'm not paying for platitudes." Riley raised an eyebrow. "Calling security? Really? Until I get actual answers." "Suit yourself." She headed for the door, passing 2 security guards entering. "Gentlemen, follow her," Mason ordered. "I want to know where she goes." Hours later, Mason returned to his car in the executive garage to find a small note tucked under the windshield wiper. "Security tracking lesson, $500 an hour. Not free, but worth every penny. P.S. Your guy Val needs better shoes for surveillance. Too squeaky. Despite his frustration, Mason found himself smiling for the first time in years. 3 days after Riley Marsh had humiliated his security team, Mason still couldn't get the red-headed detective out of his mind. The teasing note she'd left on his windshield revealed someone who could match his determination and wit, qualities sadly lacking in his social circle of yes-men and opportunists. "Jackson," Mason said into his phone, pacing his penthouse, "I need an address for Riley Marsh." "Arrow Investigations is very protective of their people," Jackson replied, "but everyone has a price." 2 hours and several $1,000s later, Mason held a slip of paper with an address in Bellingham. He debated calling first, but decided against it. Riley Marsh didn't seem like a woman who followed conventional protocols. That evening, clutching an overpriced bottle of Cabernet and a bouquet of lilies, Mason found himself outside a modest apartment building near the waterfront. The contrast between this neighborhood and his Kirkland mansion couldn't be starker. His confident knock went unanswered. He was about to leave when the door creaked open, revealing Riley wrapped in a thick blanket, her usually vibrant face flushed and her eyes glassy. "Blackwell?" she croaked, leaning heavily against the doorframe. "How did you— Never mind." She turned without another word and shuffled back inside, leaving the door open. Mason hesitated before following. The apartment was small but tasteful, its walls lined with books instead of televisions. Riley collapsed onto a worn couch, shivering despite the blanket. "You're sick," he stated unnecessarily. "Brilliant deduction," she mumbled, eyes closing. "State your business and leave." Mason set down his gifts and pressed a hand to her forehead. "You're burning up. Where's your thermometer?" 20 minutes later, having confirmed her 103-degree fever and finding no medicine in her cabinets, Mason called his personal assistant. "Lucy, I need cold compresses, fever reducers, and soup delivered to this address immediately." Riley opened one eye. "Playing Florence Nightingale doesn't change anything. I still can't find your mother." "Shut up and drink this water," Mason replied, surprising himself with his tone. "We'll discuss business when you're not delirious." By midnight, Lucy had arrived with supplies, and Mason had settled into a chair beside Riley's couch. He'd never cared for anyone sick before. Servants had always handled such matters, yet something about this fiercely independent woman brought out protective instincts he didn't know he possessed. "Why are you still here?" Riley murmured sleepily as he placed a fresh compress on her forehead. "Because nobody should be alone when they're this sick." "I'm always alone," she whispered before drifting off. Mason watched her sleeping face, suddenly determined to prove her wrong. 3 months later, when he slipped his grandmother's ring onto her finger in a small courthouse ceremony, they both knew he had. 10 years of marriage to Riley had given Mason the stability he'd never expected to find. Their Kirkland home overlooking Lake Washington provided a peaceful sanctuary, especially now that little Lily had joined their family. But some ghosts refused to be exorcised, no matter how perfect life appeared on the surface. Mason jolted awake at 5 a.m., his heart pounding. The nightmare, always the same, had returned after months of absence. In it, he was 16 again, watching his mother collapse in grief as he drove away with his father. Careful not to wake Riley, he slipped out of bed and padded to the kitchen. Outside, the first hints of dawn painted the sky in watercolor shades of pink and gold. As he prepared tea, his hands trembled slightly, an after-effect of the dream that never quite faded. "Again?" Riley appeared in the doorway, her red hair tousled from sleep. After a decade together, she could read the signs instantly. Mason nodded, pouring a second cup. "I thought they'd stopped." Riley joined him on their window seat overlooking the garden. The subconscious doesn't follow schedules, especially with anniversaries. He'd almost forgotten. Tomorrow marked 33 years since he'd left his mother standing in that Oregon dirt yard. The realization made his chest tighten. "I've been dreaming about her a lot lately," Mason admitted. "Not just the day I left, but random memories too. The way she'd work double shifts but still find energy to help with homework. How she'd make birthdays special, even when we had nothing." "Tell me something good you remember," Riley encouraged, her head resting against his shoulder. Mason was quiet for a moment. When I was sick, and I got sick a lot in that climate, she'd sing this little song. His voice grew softer as he began to hum, then quietly sing a simple, sweet melody about a bear cub finding its way home through the forest. "That's beautiful," Riley whispered when he finished. "She made it up, said it was just for me." Mason's eyes glistened. "How could I have left her, Riley? How could I have been so cruel?" "You were 16, manipulated by your father. We all make mistakes at that age. Not mistakes that destroy lives." Riley took his hand. "Mason, we never found proof she died. There's always a chance. After all this time, it's been 23 years since I started looking." "Sometimes miracles happen when we least expect them." Riley kissed his cheek. "Come back to bed. Lily will be up in an hour demanding pancakes." Mason followed his wife, the lullaby still echoing in his mind like a half-forgotten promise. Portland's waterfront park bloomed with spring flowers as Lily Blackwell, now 5 years old, danced ahead of her parents along the riverfront path. Massive container ships crawled along the Columbia River, while street performers entertained weekend crowds. "Daddy, how much longer?" Lily bounced impatiently, her party dress fluttering in the breeze. Mason checked his watch. "Your surprise should be here any minute, Princess." Riley squeezed his hand. "You outdid yourself this time. She's going to go crazy." Planning Lily's birthday celebration had been a welcome distraction from the memories that had haunted Mason since his nightmares returned. The lullaby he'd sung to Riley that dawn had played in his mind for days afterward, like a half-remembered clue to a mystery he couldn't solve. "Daddy! It's Captain Whiskers!" Lily's shriek pierced the air as a person in a 6-foot cat costume appeared, waving frantically. While Riley filmed Lily's ecstatic reaction, Mason smiled, grateful for these perfect moments. After Captain Whiskers presented Lily with an oversized plush toy and led a small crowd in singing "Happy Birthday," the family continued their walk through the park. Near the park entrance, Mason noticed an elderly woman sitting on a bench, her weathered hand extended toward passing tourists. Her clothes were threadbare but clean, her gray hair neatly braided despite her obvious poverty. "Wait here," Mason told Riley. "I'll be right back." As he approached, the woman kept her eyes downcast. Mason opened his wallet and placed several bills in her palm. "God bless you," she murmured softly. Mason nodded and turned to leave when something stopped him cold. A quiet humming from the woman's lips. A simple melody about a bear cub finding its way home. His mother's lullaby. Mason froze, unable to breathe. Slowly, he turned back. "That song," he whispered. "Where did you learn it?" The woman looked up, startled. I made it up, a long time ago." Her faded eyes studied his face with growing confusion. "For my son." "Mom?" The word escaped Mason's lips like a prayer. Evelyn's hand covered her mouth. "Mason? My Mason?" He fell to his knees before her, oblivious to passing strangers. "Mom, it's me." "It can't be," she whispered, her trembling fingers reaching out to touch his face. "My boy." "I found you," Mason choked, tears streaming freely. "After all these years, I finally found you." Riley appeared at his side, Lily's hand in hers, witnessing the miracle unfolding before them. "Mason?" Evelyn whispered, her voice breaking. "Is it really you?" He gathered her frail body into his arms, feeling her tears soak his shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I've been looking for you for so long." "You were looking for me?" Disbelief colored her voice. "Every day," he promised. "Every single day." Twilight settled over Lake Washington as Mason helped Evelyn into his Kirkland home. The bathroom lights had been on for nearly an hour, while Riley helped the elderly woman bathe and change into clean clothes, borrowed from Riley's closet. The transformation from the woman in the park to the dignified lady who now emerged was remarkable. "Is this real?" Evelyn whispered, touching the plush sofa cushions as if they might dissolve under her fingers. "I keep thinking I'll wake up back on that bench." Mason couldn't stop staring at her. Beneath the years of hardship, he could still see the mother he'd abandoned, her eyes the same gentle blue, though now surrounded by a web of wrinkles. Her once auburn hair had faded to silver, but her smile remained unchanged. "Everything's different now," he promised, his voice thick. "You're home." Lily peeked around the doorway, curiosity overcoming her initial shyness. Her eyes widened as she studied the strange woman sitting beside her father. "Are you really my grandma?" she asked, stepping into the room. Evelyn's breath caught. Yes, I suppose I am." "Daddy said you were lost," Lily stated matter-of-factly, "but now you're found." "Yes, sweetheart." Evelyn's voice trembled. "Now I'm found." Lily approached cautiously. "Do you know stories and songs? Grandmas are supposed to know lots of songs." "I know quite a few." Evelyn smiled through tears. "Would you like to hear one?" "Yes, please." Lily climbed onto the couch between Evelyn and Mason, completely at ease. Riley appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with a tender smile, as Evelyn began to sing the same lullaby Mason had remembered, the song that had reunited them against impossible odds. Lily's eyes grew heavy as the gentle melody filled the room. Later, after Lily had fallen asleep against Evelyn's shoulder and been carried to bed, Mason and Riley sat in the living room, listening as Evelyn's voice drifted down the hallway, still singing softly to the sleeping child. "I never thought I'd hear that sound again," Mason whispered, tears streaming unchecked down his face. Riley squeezed his hand. "Some wounds can heal, even after decades. All those years I spent searching, and she was sitting in a park in Portland." "The universe works in strange ways," Riley said. "Sometimes we have to lose everything before we can truly find what matters." Mason nodded, listening to his mother's voice, the same voice that had soothed his childhood fears, that had called his name as he drove away, that had somehow found its way back to him across a gulf of 33 years. The family that had been broken was whole again, the circle complete. 5 years passed like a gentle stream, washing away decades of pain. The guest cottage on Mason and Riley's property became Evelyn's sanctuary, close enough for daily visits, but private enough to rebuild her independence. The haunted look in her eyes had faded, replaced by a quiet contentment that deepened with each passing season. Mason stood on the deck watching his mother tend her garden, her once stooping frame now straight and healthy. Medical care, proper nutrition, and the absence of constant struggle had revitalized the woman who'd once huddled on a park bench. "Sometimes I still can't believe she's here," he confessed to Riley, who joined him with coffee mugs in hand. "I wake up expecting it to have been a dream." Riley leaned against his shoulder. "Your nightmares stopped." "Yes," he smiled. 3 years now. No more dreams of leaving her behind." Down in the garden, 10-year-old Lily sat cross-legged beside her grandmother, learning to plant bulbs for next spring's flowers. Their matching auburn heads bent together in concentration, one silver-streaked, one gleaming copper in the autumn sun. "They're thick as thieves," Riley observed, "always whispering secrets." "Grandma stories," Mason nodded. "Mom's teaching her all the things I was too self-absorbed to learn." The back gate swung open as their son Ethan, now 4, raced into the garden with a butterfly net. Born after Evelyn's return, he'd never known a world without his grandmother's steady presence. He flung himself into her waiting arms, nearly toppling her backward into the mulch. "He adores her," Riley said. "She's his namesake in a way," Mason replied. Evelyn, Ethan, it felt right to honor her somehow. Through the open windows, Mason could hear his mother's laugh, a sound he'd almost forgotten existed. The years of separation would always remain a painful chapter in their story, but they'd found their way to a new beginning. "I never thought forgiveness could be this complete," Mason admitted. "After everything I did, the way I treated her—" "Love doesn't keep score," Riley interrupted gently. "Your mother taught me that." As twilight approached, the family gathered around the patio table for dinner. Evelyn, once homeless and alone, now sat at the head, saying grace with Lily and Ethan's small hands clasped in hers. Mason caught her eye across the table, still amazed by the miracle of second chances. Later that evening, as Mason walked Evelyn back to her cottage, she paused beneath the stars. "Do you remember what you said that day in Portland?" she asked. "That you'd been looking for me every day?" I meant it, Mason replied. Evelyn squeezed his hand. I was looking for you too, son. Every single day in every face that passed. Some searches just take a lifetime to complete. As mother and son embraced under the night sky, Mason finally understood that some journeys were circular, bringing you back to where you began, but with a heart wise enough to recognize home when you found it again.